The grooves you just heard came from the Roland MC-505 Groovebox, a standalone synth and sequencer workstation with awesome effects and real-time control. It's great for creating and playing the hippest grooves around. Everybody's looking for all those old-school keyboards, beatboxes, and hip new sounds. Don't waste your time. Expanding on the success of the MC-303, Roland took the best of the 303, added some cool new features, and made the MC-505. First things first. This video is designed to supplement the owner's manual and quick start guides. We'll give you a variety of examples, techniques, tips, and tricks so you can get the most out of your Groovebox. Now let's take a look at what the 505 brings to the party. It's an 8-track, 8-part multi-timbral synthesizer with 64 voices of polyphony. It has 512 preset patches and 256 user patches. It also has 714 preset patterns and 200 user patterns. There are 60 RPS sets, RPS standing for real-time phrase sequencing, 30 pattern sets, a 95,000 note pattern-based sequencer with up to 32 bar patterns, a syncable arpeggiator. There's also reverb, delay, and 24 insert effects, as well as a cool new feature called MegaMix. Now that we've told you what's inside the unit, let's check out how you can control all that power. At the bottom of the unit, you have the keypad section, and it pretty much looks like a regular keyboard. You have white keys and black keys. You can play the sounds of the unit from these keypads or via MIDI through an external keyboard. On the right-hand side, you have a tap tempo button, and by tapping this button repeatedly, this will determine the tempo of your pattern. Just above that, you have the sequencer control section, complete with stop, play, record, forward and backward, a measure button to show you what measure you're on by holding it down, and a metronome button. Just press it, the metronome comes on, press it again, it turns off. Up above that, you have the real-time control section. So you have a filter and amplifier like cutoff and resonance, LFO, envelope controls, pitch controls, wave select controls, and even portamento controls. Just underneath that and to the left-hand side of that, you have the data entry section with decrease and increase buttons, page buttons and category buttons, they double as the same thing, a value knob for quick access of different values, and then you have your exit and enter buttons. At the top of the unit, you have the user interface with the current and next pattern displays, also a backlit LCD display. Then we have the display section. The tempo mixer button will allow you to view and change the current tempo and the mixer settings of the part mixer. The pattern set button will allow you to choose from 30 different pattern sets. The pattern and song button will allow you to choose and view either the song or pattern of your choice, depending on which mode you're in, either song or pattern. The RPS button will allow you to choose from 60 RPS sets. The patch button will allow you to view as well as choose from the 512 preset patches as well as the user patches. Just to the right of that, you have the bank selectors for presets, users, or the external memory card. Just to the left of the user interface, you have the D-beam controller, and I know you know about the D-beam already because you bought the machine. It is an infrared beam of light. You wave your hand over the light, and it is just like turning a knob or moving a slider. The D-beam controls are right here. To the left of that, you have the low boost. To the left of that, you have the volume knob. Underneath the volume knob, you have the play quantize section. To the right-hand side of that, you have the arpeggiator section. And underneath both of those, you have the real-time effects controls, so you can adjust the amount of reverb, delay, or insert effects. Underneath that, you have the keyboard pad controls, which would give you plus and minus octave, the hold button, the transpose button, the pattern call, and RPS buttons as well.
Holding down the edit button will allow you to get to anything in a hollow white box under the keypads. By holding down the shift button, that will also allow you to get to anything in a hollow black box under the keypads, as well as quantize select, parameter copy, and initialize.
In the dead center of the unit, you have the multifunction part mixer, complete with 8 sliders and muting buttons as well underneath that. Depending on what level of the part mixer you're on, the slider can control level, pan, key shift, reverb amount, delay amount, effects amount, or the MegaMix section. The back panel is pretty straightforward. Let's check it out. First, you have the stereo headphone jack, left and right mix outputs, left and right output 1, left and right output 2, the assignable pedal jack, MIDI in, MIDI out, which doubles as MIDI through, the smart media card slot, and the MC-505 has an internal power supply. I know what you're thinking. Cool, no wall wart. The 505 has some really slammin' preset patterns that you can use to build your songs. To select a pattern, either rotate the value dial or use the increment and decrement buttons.
To play a pattern, make sure in the display section that you push pattern/song. To actually play the pattern, press the play button in the sequencer section, and to stop it, press the stop button.
You can also select different categories by using the page buttons. So for trance, techno, rave, or industrial, drum and bass or jungle, hip hop, or house music.
If you're going to choose a category for the different patterns, make sure you press stop before choosing the category button, and then press play.
By using the part mixer, you can take a pattern and come up with different variations by simply muting individual parts or rhythm groups. So let's say if you're a DJ, you can play one pattern over and over again and just simply mute different parts. Take a look.
When muting parts, press the part mute button or rhythm mute button, and then mute the parts you want.
When you're playing a pattern, if you press the play button again, it will begin to flash. This is called mute retain. And by using mute retain, the next pattern that you call up will have the same mute settings that your previous pattern did. Take a look. Same mute pattern. Everybody wants real-time control, and the 505's got it. You can control the filter by utilizing the low pass, band pass, high pass filter, and peaking, as well as the cutoff and the resonance.
Let's select the bass part. We'll press Part Select and then part number 2 for the bass.
Just to the right-hand side of the arpeggiator is a function button. And notice the word function is in a solid white box. Here's an example on how you use the function button. When the function button is pressed, if you look at the cutoff knob, it says individual tone level in a solid white box. So now this knob controls individual tone level. Take a listen. Once again, keep in mind, when the function button is pressed, knobs will control the parameter that is in the solid white box. The 505 will also let you control 3 different envelopes, one for the pitch, the filter, and the amp by simply moving the sliders. You can control depth, attack, decay, sustain, and release, all in real time. You can also control the LFO. Once again, you can choose either pitch, filter, or amp, and you can control how much, how fast, and what kind. For an explanation of waveform types, refer to page 51 in your owner's manual. Crazy stuff. The center of the Groovebox contains a multifunction part mixer with 8 sliders for more real-time control. In the display section, you press the tempo mixer button. The display will show you the current part mixer function and the current location of the 8 sliders. On the left-hand side of the part mixer, it says level. When that's lit, the different sliders control the levels of the 8 different parts. When you press the button on the left-hand side, it goes down to pan. And now you have all the way up, hard right, all the way down, hard left. Press it again and it says key shift, so you can go in increments of 1 to 2 to 3, 1 octave, 2 octaves, and so on. Press it again and you have reverb send level. Press it again and you have delay send level. Once again, you have the EFX and output levels. Either you can insert an effect at this point or you can direct to a multiple output. The last one is the MegaMix function. We'll cover that right now. MegaMix is one of the quickest ways to create new patterns by using parts from other patterns. Sound confusing? Watch this. I have a pattern playing. I want to use the drums from a different pattern. I'll choose a different pattern while in MegaMix. Everything else stays the same, just the drums change. I'll move on to the bass sound. And now the bass is going to come from a different pattern into this one. Move on to the guitar sound. 1, 2, 3. Move on to that lead sound. Last but not least, the electric piano. What did we start off with? Oh, that's right. Once you've created a pattern you dig, you can save it to a user location by pressing the right button, rotating the value dial to choose the location,
and then press the Enter button twice.
By far, the hottest new thing on your Groovebox is the D-Beam controller. It's an invisible beam of light that sends controller information. So instead of turning a knob or pressing a key, you can just wave your hand over the beam.
First, turn on the D-Beam controller.
Now, using the turntable effect, I can simulate how a DJ will slow down a turntable. You can also play it. Using the cut and reso effect, I can simulate turning the cut off or the resonance. By using the ad-lib effect, you can play notes by waving your hand over the beam. And you'll always be in key with the pattern that you're playing. Also, in the D-Beam controller section, if you hold down the on button, the display will tell you what scale type you've chosen. You can use the page buttons to choose different scale types. There are 21 to choose from. And if you want an explanation of the scale types, refer to page 126 in your owner's manual. By holding down the on button in the D-Beam controller section and rotating the value dial, you can choose from 28 different D-Beam effects. Now remember when I chose ad-lib, you could hear every single note that was played. But if you hold down the on button and choose number 26, which is note plus bend, you get a much smoother effect. Number 18 is the delay send level. For a transforming effect, use all mute. When you're holding down the D-Beam controller button and scrolling through the different D-Beam effects, some of the effects will have the letter A after them and some will have the letter S after them. The A stands for all parts. The S stands for selected part. So if I'm using key shift A, all parts will be shifted. And if I use key shift S, only the selected part, which happens to be my bass part. Notice the drums have not been shifted. By using the modulation effect, you can trigger modulation from the D-Beam. The 505's Arpeggiator can create a rhythmic phrase using notes you hold down. This can make a phrase that's nearly impossible to play possible. You can choose from 43 preset styles or create 10 of your own. Now let's listen to the note that I'm going to play. Put on the Arpeggiator. One note or maybe more than one note. You can put the hold button on as well. And then go up and hold down the Arpeggiator on button and rotate the value dial to choose different styles. You can also do this with keyboard sounds as well. Okay, to give you a chance to catch your breath, I'll apply what we've covered so far to this next jam. The 505 has a pattern-based drum machine style sequencer that will allow you to record up to 32 measures per pattern. You can record in either real time or step time. Now, whether you choose to create from scratch or modify an existing pattern, all information gets thrown into the temporary buffer. Now, what's the temporary buffer, you say? Think of it as kind of like a scratch pad. Once you do all of the editing that you like, save it into a user location. Okay, there's a few different ways to get into the temporary buffer. Let's say the first way you want to modify an existing pattern. So simply go to that pattern by rotating the value dial, press record, then press stop, and you'll be in the temporary buffer. The second way is, let's say you want to have an empty pattern in the user bank. So you go to that empty pattern, press record, then press stop, you'll be in the temporary buffer. The last way, go to preset number 1. It's called Psytrance number 1, which is at P01. Rotate the value dial to the left, one click, you'll be in the temporary buffer. So now, let's record a drum pattern. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is choose a pattern. We're going to create from scratch, so we're going to go to the user bank and choose an empty pattern. So we'll press the user bank button, and we'll go to, let's say, number 79. It says empty pattern. We need to get into the temporary buffer, so we'll press record and then stop. The screen will display empty pattern in the temporary buffer. Next thing we need to do is actually choose a rhythm set. So we go over to the part select button, we press R for rhythm, then we go to the display section and press patch. Our first patch is P01, which is the TR909 drum set. That sounds good for now, so we'll go back to pattern song in the display mode. And we'll check the tempo. So we press the tempo, it says it's 120, that's fine. We can go back to the pattern song. Now, we're just about ready to get started. We press record one time. Then you have the page buttons up here right above the value dial. It tells us on our screen that we have a 4/4 beat. We page to the right. The pattern length is 4 measures. We can do fine with that. If we want to change it, just rotate the dial. Page to the right again, the count in is 2. That means 2 measures. Well, what we want is wait note, so we'll rotate the value dial until it says wait note. Page to the right again, the loop rest we can leave off for now, and then the input quantize. The resolution happens to be 16th notes right now, so we'll leave it there as well. Page all the way back over, we'll press record again to get into step recording, and then we'll press play. Now right now, you'll see that the lights start going all the way across, showing you that we're going through one measure and into the next measure and into the next measure. Remember, we have a 4-measure pattern. So we need to actually choose what sound we want to play. So by holding down Shift and going through the different sounds, you can audition what you want. And we're going to choose a kick drum, so number 2 will be fine. Now, you do have a scale area just above the keypads. You have it broken down into 4 areas or 2 areas, depending on which scale you choose. Now, we're going to choose the bottom scale, which happens to mean that 1, 2, 3, and 4 is in the first beat, 5, 6, 7, and 8 is in the second beat, 9, 10, 11, and 12 is in the third beat, and 13 through 16 is in the fourth beat. We're going to do a house pattern, so that means the kick needs to be on 1, 2, 3, and 4. So in this situation, number 1, number 5, number 9, and number 13. All you have to simply do is press the number 1, the number 5, the number 9, and the number 13. The pads will light up, showing you that you have a drum right there. Up on the current display, it shows you what measure you're currently in. So we need to move forward to the next measure, because we only used one measure right now. So you go over to the sequencer control area and press the forward button. The current display says 2, so now we have a complete measure to work in. So we press number 1, 5, 9, and 13, press forward again, 1, 5, 9, and 13, and forward again, 1, 5, 9, and 13. So now we have 4 beats of kick drum on every measure in our 4-bar pattern. We go back over with backward to pattern number, or measure number 1, I should say. And the next we want is a snare. So we hold down Shift to audition. And we have all kinds of different drum sounds here, and I want to go to number 6 is a good snare for this one. And I want it to happen on 5 and 13 because I want it to go boom, snare, each time. So we press number 5, number 13, go forward, number 5, number 13, number 5, number 13, number 5, and number 13. And I accidentally pressed 14. All I have to do is press it again. It'll turn off, and I can press 13 again. So now you should have kick, snare, with 4 kicks on the quarter notes. And then press stop. Okay, now that we laid in the kick and the snare in step time, we need to lay in some hi-hats and claps. We'll do the hi-hats first, but maybe I don't want to use step time. Maybe I want to use real time and give it a more human feel. So what we're going to do is we're going to find, first of all, the hi-hats that we want to play. So we'll go through and press all the buttons, and okay, there's some hi-hats there on the black keys. Let's try it an octave down using the keyboard pad on the left-hand side. Okay, here's some other hi-hats. I'll use those. And all I'm going to do is play a pattern like this. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the record button, press it 1 time. It's already set up into my 4-bar patterns. It's already set up to wait note. Remember, we already did that as far as the count-in was concerned. So let's turn on the metronome. Above the stop button, press the metronome button. You can hear it ticking in quarter notes. So this tells you, okay, whenever I start playing, it's going to start playing with me. So now we'll just do the hi-hat pattern. I recorded 4 bars, and it loops around just like a drum machine and continues to play. Now we'll go ahead and press stop. Notice that the metronome keeps going, so you press it again to turn it off. Hi-hats are done. Let's press it and see what it sounds like. Okay, pretty cool. If you press stop twice, it'll start back at the beginning of the pattern. Nice little tip and trick, I guess I'll give you there. Next thing we want is some claps. So let's go to, I know the claps are on number 5. Let's go an octave up. Now we'll go back down to this one here. And I'll just play them in time. Put on the metronome by pressing record, then the metronome. Press, now see, I don't want to start by playing this note. Even though it's on wait note, I can just press play, it'll start recording, and then I play in time the way I like. Actually, I'll let it go through 1 full time before I even start playing. Just to get the feel of it. It's on the 4th bar. You can turn off the metronome while it's playing or while it's recording, either one. Okay, now that we've got the drums recorded, let's move on to the bass part. And we'll also do this in real time. So we'll go to part select, and instead of choosing R for rhythm, we'll move over to part number 2. That's where we'll put our bass. And the next thing we want to do is choose the patch. So we go up to the display section and choose patch. And it says lead TB01. And that's going to be a TB type sound. You take a listen to it. like a TB303, but that's not what we want for bass. So I can use the page buttons, which also double as the category buttons, and move over to the bass sounds. So I'll page to the right, or category to the right, 1, 2, 3, 4 times to the basses, and I'll listen to the sound. Okay, I'll turn the dial to choose the sound that I actually want, and we'll go with solid bass. Okay, we'll go back over to pattern song, and let's give it a shot and see what it sounds like. Press record. It's all ready to go. We'll turn on the metronome, why not? It's already on wait note, and we're ready to go. Okay, well, let's say I messed up, and I want to get rid of that stuff, just on the fly while I'm recording. I can go over to the edit button on the left-hand side. It says real-time erase underneath it. So while I'm recording and the pattern is continuing to play, press edit one time, the screen displays real-time erase note. And all I have to do is hold down the range of notes that I played, or that I actually want to erase, and it'll get rid of them. So I'll just do the whole thing, why not? All the pads will light up, showing you that it's covering all the notes within this range. Let it play all the way through so you know you got all of the notes out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now they're all gone. You go back and press the edit button again. It says now recording again. Let's press stop, turn off the metronome, and play it back again. We should only have our drums still. Exactly. So this time we'll move on to maybe an arpeggiated bass sound instead, so I can get some really wacky kind of thing happening. So let's go back. Here's our bass sound. Turn on the arpeggiator and play the bass sound again. Sounds like a helicopter, so let's move on to a different type of arpeggio. So hold down the arpeggiator on button. It says glissando. Turn the value dial, and we'll choose sequence B. Let's take a listen. Okay, a pretty good little arpeggio going. Next thing we want to do, press record. Page over to the right to turn off the quantizing, because the type of arpeggio we chose had maybe like a little 32nd note happening, or a 24th note rather than just 16th notes. So if you have the quantizing on, it isn't going to record this entire arpeggio the way it's supposed to be recorded. So all you have to do is move over, page over to the input quantize resolution, rotate the dial until it says off. Page back over, turn back on the metronome, and let's go to town. Press stop, turn off the metronome, and turn off the arpeggiator. It's really important you turn off the arpeggiator because you've already recorded the arpeggiator. No need to have it on anymore. Let's listen to what we got. Loop around. Perfect. Okay, now that we've got the bass and the drums, let's record like just a nice pad over the whole thing. Let's move over to part number 3. Let's go back up to the patch. Let's choose a patch that we want. I'll just category over one time into the different synth waves, and I'll move up to sound number 36. It's called Reso Syn Lead. Go back to pattern song, and let's see what it sounds like. Okay, that sounds pretty good. Now we want to move up because the octave is too low. Well, we'll go right there, it's fine. So we can get something happening like this. Okay, next thing we need to do to actually record it, press record. Page over to the quantizing. Remember, we turned off the quantizing when we were doing the arpeggiated bass part. So let's put it back to 16th notes. And then page back over. Put the metronome on again. And we'll just play one note. Why not? It's a sweeping type of sound anyways. Check it out. Pretty easy to do. Okay, now recording notes was easy. A lot of people are going to say, okay, well, what about all those knobs and everything? The knobs, sliders, and buttons, well, will they be recorded as well? Yes, definitely. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the bass sound, isolate it a little bit, and maybe bring up some of the filter, give it a little bit of a sweeping action to it. So let's go back to part number 2, and first we'll go to part mute, and mute out the drums and mute out that pad sound we just got done recording. Go back to part select, we're on the bass sound. Let's listen to the bass sound by itself. Okay, that's fine. And let's actually record some knob tweaks. So we'll press record, put the metronome back on, and press play. You can hear it playing. We'll wait till it comes back around and we'll start messing with the cutoff and the resonance. And then press stop. Turn off the metronome and let's listen back. Okay. Now, the level of the bass maybe wasn't loud enough compared to the drums and the pad, so I'll go into the part mixer, I'll make sure that level is lit on the left-hand side, and I'll adjust the levels of the actual sounds. Not necessarily record them in real time, but I'll just move them so I know that the bass is going to be louder than the pads, and maybe not as loud as the drums. Now check that out right now. We'll just play it. We'll unmute the other 2 parts, and we'll adjust the levels. Okay, there's the mix I want. So now let's do the smart thing and save what we've done. Press the right button on the left-hand side of the machine. The screen says pattern write U001. Now that's user number 1, which is not where we wanted to save this. There may be something already there. So let's move over to user 79. You rotate the value dial until it says U79. Underneath that it says empty pattern. That happens to be the name of our pattern right now. So if you use the page buttons to the right, it'll move your cursor to the bottom level of the display underneath the E in empty. If you rotate the value dial, you can change it to say whatever you want. So we'll choose an H, maybe it'll say Humpty pattern now. Okay, you can page to the right and change the M to something, page to the right, change the P to something else, and choose whatever name you like. Then if you page back to the left-hand side so the cursor is underneath U79, we can go ahead and save it. But please don't do what I did. I learned the hard way. I would save all kinds of patterns to locations that already had patterns in them, and I lost a bunch of patterns. So I'm going to give you a little tip here, and hopefully you can use this every single time you go to write something. If you move your cursor underneath the name or the location of the actual pattern in the upper right-hand corner of the display, you can press the undo and redo button, and it will show you what pattern is actually at the location that you're trying to save to. If it says empty pattern, chances are that'll be fine to save to. But if it says something else, like the name of a pattern you already currently saved, you may not want to save it there. So then you would press undo and redo, rotate the dial, and then press undo and redo again and see what else is on the next location, so maybe you could save it there. So once you finally decide where you're going to save it, you know you're not going to save over something else because you did check the undo redo button plenty of times to make sure, then you press the enter button. The screen says pattern write U079, are you sure? You press enter again, it says processing. It's very important to keep the power on, otherwise it will not complete the writing procedure. So once it's done, it'll show you the name of your pattern and the location that it's at. You're all done. The Groovebox comes with 2 types of quantize: play quantize and edit quantize. Edit quantize we'll get into a little bit later. But play quantize is kind of like a temporary or performance type of quantize. While the pattern's playing, turn on the quantizing, go to town, adjust the timing knob, and you're on your way. I'll show you a couple different examples. We've already chosen the grid quantize because we had 16th note quantize on when we were recording our song. Okay, or recording our pattern, I should say. So now we'll move on to, say, groove quantize, which is kind of set to a triplet type of effect. Here's the grid quantize. Press the button and moves it to groove quantize, and you can hear the triplet feel. Move on to the shuffle quantize to give it a swing feel. And in case you've forgotten what we started off with, you can press the button again to turn it off. It goes back to the way it was. And there you go.
While in Groove Quantize, hold down the Play Quantize button, rotate the value dial, and you can choose from up to 71 different groove templates. For a listing of the groove templates, refer to page 116 in your owner's manual.
Another really cool control feature is real-time smart transposing. What's that, you ask? Basically what happens is you transpose everything except the rhythm part. And the way you do it is you hold down the transpose button, rotate the value dial. That's it. Check it out. I'm going to go +4. Ready? 3. Now. Different key. Drums stayed the same. I'm going to go -8. Now. To put it back to what it was before, simply press the transpose button again. And it's back the way it was. One more time. And there you go. The effects section of the 505 contains your standard reverb and syncable delay, as well as dance-oriented insert effects, such as overdrive and distortion for techno drums and bass lines, to lo-fi and phonograph for those gutter funk hip-hop tracks. Now, I've got a techno pattern here, and I'm going to put some overdrive on the bass and the drums. So here's what it sounds like with nothing. I'm going to get into the effects section. I hold down the shift button and press number 7. It says effects type on the screen. I rotate the value dial to choose overdrive. I exit out by pressing exit. I go up into the part mixer section and press the function button repeatedly until EFX out is lit. And then go to part R and part 2 and bring the sliders all the way to the top to add in overdrive. Now listen to the difference. Let's turn it off and bring it back in. You can get some wild and crazy stuff with that. Let's move on to another pattern. I'm going to bring in some lo-fi effect and phonograph effect on a different type of track. Let's go to one of those gutter funk hip-hop tracks. Without effects. Sounds pretty good. You may want to grunge it up a little bit, make it a little bit more dirty. So hold down shift, go to number 7 again, and instead choose lo-fi. Exit out by pressing exit. Go back down to EFX out. We've got a couple parts here. And see what you get. The drums are already on lo-fi. Let's turn those off. There's what we had before. Let's add the lo-fi effect. And even to the bass. It gets really dirty. Now that CDs have eliminated record or vinyl noise, we all want it back now. So using the phonograph insert effect, we can get it back with as little or as much as we want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a regular pattern, doesn't have anything on it. Okay? And I'm going to add in the phonograph insert effect. So hold down shift and go to the number 7, which says EFX underneath it. Press that one time. It says the EFX type right now is compressor, so I'll rotate the value dial to phonograph. Yeah, there it is. So what we want to do is we're going to go through a couple of the parameters. So if you page to the right, you can choose the disc type. So you have LP, EP, and for all you video people out there, we have SP. Okay, it just actually makes it a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, and a lot smaller. So we'll choose LP because we do want a long playing record. Page to the right again, you have the disc noise level. So I can rotate the value dial as little as you want or as much as you want. Page to the right again, and you have the depth. So that would mean how thick maybe the grooves were inside the record. So you can Ooh. We'll go with the raunchiest one. And then you have output pan and output level. So we'll leave those alone. Exit out of there. And we'll play it and apply it to everything. Now it should sound like an old record. Take it off. Take it off completely. And there you have phonograph. One of the other unique effects that the MC-505 has to offer is the slicer. Think of it as kind of like a staccato effect, where you play a long drawn-out chord and the slicer will slice it up and play like a rhythmic phrase out of it. I'll give you an example. Here's the phrase by itself without any effects. Just long drawn-out chords. Okay? So then, just like we did before, we'll hold down Shift, go to number 7. The effects type, we'll rotate the dial until it says slicer. We'll exit back out of there. We'll play it again and then bring the slider up for the EFX send. And you see how it slices it up into little rhythmic phrases. If you want to go in and alter the rhythmic phrase, you can hold down Shift again, go back to number 7, page over to the right, and you can rotate the dial and choose different rhythmic phrases. Page to the right again, and you have different accent rates over the rhythmic phrase. Now that we've taken a look at some of the insert effects, let's take a look at the reverb and delay. First thing we need to do is in the part mixer, on the left-hand side you have the part mixer function button, and let's press it repeatedly until reverb is highlighted or reverb is lit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to play just a standard drum patch. Now as far as what type of reverb I'm going to add, if I hold down Shift and go to number 5, which is reverb, it'll show me that my reverb type is stage 1. I have a couple choices, room 1, room 2, stage 1, stage 2, hall 1, and hall 2. So I'll leave it on stage 1 for right now. If you page over, you have your reverb time. Page over, your high filter damper. Page over, you have your EFX to reverb level. So it's a way to mix in your EFX through your reverb processor. Page over to the right again, your reverb level. And that's all you got. So you page all the way back over, we'll stay on stage, press exit, and add in some reverb. I'll go in and actually change the reverb type. Shift, reverb, room 1. Make it real short. And there's your reverb. You can add it to any one of the 8 parts on however much you want, a little bit or a lot. If we move into the delay, we can add in a couple different types of delay, and I'll show you that right now. If you press the part mixer function button again, so delay is lit, then hold down Shift and go to number 6, which is delay. You have 2 types, short and long. If you choose short delay, you have milliseconds to choose with. So if you want 200 millisecond delay, 400 millisecond delay, and so on. But if you choose the long type, you can have milliseconds, or it can sync to the BPM or the tempo of your pattern. And you can set it up for like 8th notes, 8th note triplets, dotted 8th notes, 16th notes, and so on. So I'll show you just standard milliseconds. If we page over, I can choose the delay time as 570 milliseconds. Remember, it's not synced. Something like that. But let's go with the syncable delay. I'll just rotate the value dial to the right until I get past 1000 milliseconds, and I'll choose a 16th note. right in time. We'll switch to eighth note triplets, dotted 16th note. Some of these just may not work, but they still do. Straight eighth notes. And you still have feedback control and other standard delay parameters. Now that we've recorded a pattern, let's take a look at some of the types of edits that we can perform. In order to completely edit, we're going to use the edit grid located underneath the keypads. There are 3 levels of edit grid. The top level says pattern song, and it is in a hollow white box. The lower level below that is in a hollow black box, and then just below that you have the patch edit grid, which is also in a hollow white box. Just to the left-hand side of the keypads, you have an edit button and a shift button. The edit button happens to be in a hollow white box, and the shift button is in a hollow black box. So obviously, if you want to get to anything that's in a hollow white box, you have to hold down the edit button and press the appropriate key. Okay, first thing we're going to do, we created a pattern. You've heard it plenty of times by now. And so what we're going to do is use copy. We're going to take the 4-measure pattern and copy all of that 4 measures to the end of itself, making it an 8-measure pattern. So the first thing we're going to do is hold down edit and go to the pattern song, which is the very first level of the edit grid, and hold down number 1, which is copy. The screen reads edit copy, and down at the bottom it says from equals 1, 4 equals 1. So what they're asking now is from measure 1, 4, how many measures? And so what we want is from measure 1, that's fine, page over to the right, and we want for all. We really want 4 measures, but if you look at what you can choose from, you can choose from 1, 2, 3, or all, because we only had a 4-measure pattern. So we say 1 for all, we go ahead and press enter. It says destination pattern is utemp, which is fine because we always want to be working in the temporary buffer. So press enter again. It says destination measure. Now, it defaults at 1. What we want to do is put it at the end. So if we rotate the value dial, we can choose end. It's the next option right after 4. So then you press enter again. The status, it says it equals all. If you rotate the value dial, you can choose from note, so just notes will be copied. You can choose PC for program change, CC for control change, bend, polyphonic aftertouch, and so on, but we're going to choose all, so you rotate it all the way to all. Then you press enter again. The mode equals replace. Now if there was something already at measure 5, 6, 7, and 8, then we could choose mix and it would mix in the information together. But there's nothing there, so we can choose replace. Press enter again. How many times would you like to repeat this 4-measure pattern? So right now if we say 1 time, it'll be an 8-measure pattern because you take 4 measures and copy it 1 time. If you do it twice, it'll be a 12-measure pattern. 3 times would be a 16-measure pattern. We'll just choose once. Press enter again. Then it says, are you sure? You go ahead and press enter. It says processing, keep power on, and then it says complete. Now, we're back into the temporary area. We take a look at how many measures we have to see if it worked. We hold down the measure button on the right-hand side, and under current it says 8 rather than 4, just like we had before. So you have an 8-measure pattern. So if you want to actually get rid of that and just go back to what it was, let's say you recorded something or you made an edit by mistake. You accidentally pressed enter when you shouldn't have. There is an undo button. It's located on the left-hand side, and it's right next to the right button that we've chosen in the past. So if we want to undo, go ahead and press it. It says undo, are you sure? And sure, we're sure, so we go ahead and press enter. It says processing, it says complete, hold down the measure button, and you're back to 4 measures. Very easy to copy. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to go in and erase something. Now, we have a 4-measure pattern because I just undid it, because we had 8 measures and I undid it and made it 4. So what we're going to do now is we're going to erase 1 measure. Now, there's a lot of people get confused with erasing and deleting. Now, I have an analogy for you. See if this makes any sense. If I give you a piece of paper and it has writing on it and I say erase the writing, you're still going to have a piece of paper. But if I say delete the piece of paper, meaning take the piece of paper and throw it away, you are going to not have a piece of paper, nor are you going to have writing. So in music and in pattern-wise, what we have is, here's 4 measures. I'm going to erase measure 2, meaning get rid of the information that's in measure 2, but leave measure 2 there. So now, measure 1 will play, measure 2 will be blank, measure 3 will play, and measure 4 will play. If I were to delete measure 2, I wouldn't have 4 measures anymore, I'd only have 3, because it would take measure 2 and all of its notes, get rid of it. Measure 3 would bump right up against measure 1, so you'd have measure 1, 3, and 4. But what we're going to do right now is erase rather than delete. So here we go. Hold down the Edit button and go to the number 2 key, which is Erase. Press it 1 time. The screen says Edit, Erase from 1 for 1, and we want to erase measure 2 for 1 measure. So rotate the value dial. It says from 2 for 1, meaning only 1 measure to erase. Go ahead and press Enter. Press Enter again. Status is all. Are you sure? Press Enter again. Complete. And now take a look at what we got. There's measure 1. It's blank. There's measure 3, and there's measure 4. Again, measure 1, it's blank for measure 2, measure 3, and measure 4. So that worked perfect. Let's go and undo that. Just press the undo redo button. It says undo, are you sure? Press Enter. Processing complete, and it should go back to the way it was. There's the normal measure number 2. Okay, so we talked about erase. Let's go on to delete. If we hold down Edit again and go to number 3, it says delete measure from 1 for 1, and we want to delete measure 2 for 1 measure. So rotate the value dial. It says from 2 for 1 measure. Press Enter. Press Enter again. It says are you sure? Press Enter. Processing complete. Now take a look. We hold down the measure button. It says we only have 3 measures instead of 4. And see how it sounds. Measure 1, there's the measure 3, and then measure 4, loop around. Measure 3, and then measure 4. So that's the difference, we'll undo it, between erasing and deleting. Then there's also inserting, yet I had to add another one. And inserting would be, I have 4 measures. I'm going to insert in between measure 1 and measure 2 another measure, meaning give me 5 measures, and make the second measure blank. So it's going to go measure 1, a blank measure, the old measure 2, the old measure 3, and the old measure 4, giving you a total of 5. So that's what I'm going to do. Hold down Edit, go to number 4, which is Insert. Insert measure from 1 for 1, and what I want is from measure 2 for 1. Press Enter, Enter again, are you sure? Press Enter. Complete. Now, how many measures we have? We hold down the measure button. Under current, it says 5. So let's take a look at what we got. There's measure 1, the new blank measure, the old measure 2, the old measure 3, the old measure 4, back to number 1, and the new blank measure. Old measure 2, and so on. Very easy to do. Let's undo again, press Enter, and now we're back to what we had with the 4 measures. And then after that, we have something called transpose. Remember, we dealt with real-time transpose, where as the pattern was playing, we could transpose up or down or so on and so on. So what we're going to do now is more like the permanent type of transpose. And what we'll do is, like, say I need to transpose just the bass, and we can do that on a per-part basis. So we'll hold down hold down Edit, and then number 5 for transpose. It says Edit Transpose, and then it says Bias. Bias means how far would you like to transpose? If it's +1, it's making a C sharp. If it's +2, it's making a C a D. If it's -1, it's making a C a B. If it's -2, it's making a C a B flat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to determine just the actual part I want to transpose. So we have part R, part 2, and part 3. I want just part 2 to be transposed. So I'll turn off everything except the number 2. So therefore only the bass will get transposed. And we'll transpose +3. Press Enter. Are you sure? Press Enter. Now when you hear the bass, it might not sound right, but it is transposed up 3. Doesn't really match with everything else, but you can see how it transposed. We'll go back, undo, are you sure? Press Enter, complete, and we're back the way we were. Just like that. The next thing we're going to do is change the velocity of the actual notes that are being played. So maybe something's playing a little too loud and you want to lower it. This is exceptionally handy when you're dealing with rhythm parts, because if you're going to go change the volume of, say, just the hi-hats or something, then that means you've basically changed the entire rhythm kit, and you would have to save a whole new kit if you want the machine to remember that. So what you may want to do is just change the velocity in the sequencing section, meaning the notes weren't hit quite as hard as they were a second ago. So we'll just go in and remember the clap sound that we used. We'll just lower that a little bit so it's not so loud in the mix. So the first thing we need to do is select the part. So we go to Part Select, R for Rhythm, hold down Edit, and then go to Change Velocity, which is pad number 6. Then it says Change Velocity, Bias, and we'll choose the bias. And at this point we'll say, how about a drastic change, -40. So that means lower the velocity. If it was hit at 127, bring it 40 down from there, okay? And then we'll choose the actual part, so we'll take away the other parts, basically is what you're doing, and make sure only R is lit up, so it only knows to look into the R part. But in a rhythm part, you have a lot of different instruments on different keys. So how does this machine know to only affect the clap and not the kick or the snare or the hi-hat? So what we're going to do is, down at the bottom, all the keypads are lit up. So we just need to press the either range of keys that we want to change the velocity of, or just the individual key, which in our case, that's what we're going to do. So keypad number 5 is the clap. And you can hear it, so you can make sure that it's just keypad number 5. And at that point, we're ready. You press Enter. It says, are you sure? You press Enter again, and let's check the result. Now the clap isn't quite so loud. Well, let's undo and see what kind of change it really did make. Undo, are you sure? Enter. We'll go back to the way it was before. The clap's much higher in the mix. So that's changing velocity. That moves us over to changing gate time. Now, gate time is how long was the note actually pressed. So maybe in a rhythmic thing, like a clap or something, it wasn't pressed very long. It was just like that. But if we're talking about that pad that we held down, we may want to change how long it was held down rather than having to re-record it again. So let's go and do that. That's on part number 3. So Part Select, number 3, hold down Edit, and go to number 7, which is Change Gate. It says Change Gate, Bias, and we're going to bring it down. Let me see, it was probably held a long time, so let's bring it down a long ways. How about 99? So that's as far as you can go, is 99. And we just want it on number 3. And then we'll press Enter. Are you sure? Press Enter again, complete, and let's see how long it held out. It cut off, and then it came in again. Instead of holding all the way to the next time that it was played, it just cut off a little sooner. You can do this repeatedly. Let's say 99 is not enough. I want to go another 99. Well, you just go through the same exact procedure. Hold down Edit, go to number 7, put it to -99 and press Enter a couple times again. You do exactly the same thing. So we'll go and undo that. Are you sure? Press Enter, complete, and we're back to the way we were before. The next thing is shifting clock. This comes in real handy when you're trying to get a human feel, because not all humans, face it, we don't play directly on the clock time. So a lot of times we're ahead of the beat, a lot of times we're behind the beat, especially if you're talking about a bass guitarist, a drummer, any instrument for that matter. So what we'll do is we'll shift the notes that were played on the bass. Instead of being right on the beat, we'll shift them a little bit behind the beat, so he was kind of lagging a little bit. And we'll do that by pressing Edit, going to number 8, which is Shift Clock. The bias, we're going to make it go, I'll do something drastic. I'll make it like +14. So that's ahead of, or actually behind the beat, 14 ticks. And then we'll turn off everything else except part number 2, because that's the bass. Press Enter. What do you want to actually change, or shift clock, I should say? And we'll say all for status. Press Enter again. Are you sure? Press Enter again. Complete. And now let's listen. The bass should be playing a little bit out of time behind the beat. Sounds pretty bad, but I did a drastic change. If you did a couple ticks, like maybe just +1 or +2, you'd get a more human feel if you do that to all of your different instruments. We'll undo and put it back. Press Enter again. Complete. It's back to the way it was. Okay. Taking us to the next thing. Under pad number 9, it says Data Thin. Now, all this basically does is freeze up some of your memory. Let's say that you had a remote keyboard with a pitch bender on it, and you were playing in a part and bending the pitch. Now, each time you move that bender ever so slightly, it sends out a piece of information, an event. And pretty soon, bending it just one way could be like maybe 1,000 different events. And so now you're maybe taxing the whole machine's memory at this point because you're using a lot of bending or a lot of aftertouch, something like that. So what we want to do is maybe go in and data thin out. And instead of it being 1,000 events for one pitch bend, let's make it only like 500. Cut it in half. Now that means that the bend isn't going to be quite so smooth, but it will go, instead of boom, it's going to go maybe, depending on how much you thin it out. And the way you would do that is you hold down Edit, go to Data Thin, which is number 9, choose what part you want to actually thin out, and then when you arrow over to the right, it'll ask you the status, and you can say everything, but usually you don't want to thin out notes, but maybe control changes, if you rotate the dial, bending, aftertouch, different things like that. So that is how to data thin. The next thing we have is quantize. Remember we talked about quantize before. Play quantize was the temporary or performance-oriented quantize, which is only while you're playing the pattern, where this quantize in the edit grid is permanent. I liked that shuffle groove that I had going, or that shuffle quantize I had going, so what I want to do is I want to actually make the pattern keep that. So what we have to do is go up to play quantize and choose the shuffle quantize that we had before, which makes the pattern sound like this. Has that kind of swinging feel from side to side. And the way you do that, you go to Edit again, go to number 10, which says Quantize underneath it. It says Edit Quantize, select Quantize part, and we want everything to be quantized. So we'll press Enter. It says, Are you sure? Press Enter again. And now the quantize in the Play Quantize goes off because the parts are currently quantized permanently. So now you wouldn't have to have Play Quantize on. So when you like what the Play Quantize is doing, then you can edit Quantize and it will keep it that way. We'll go back and undo, press Enter again, and it goes back the way it was. The last thing on the edit grid is reclock. Now what reclock is going to do, it'll let you do two different things. It'll let you take a pattern and cut it in half as far as its tempo is concerned and the amount of measures, or double it. I'll do both of them to show you what happens. Now remember, our tempo is at 120, and we have a 4-measure pattern right now. And it plays and sounds like this. So if we hold down Edit and go to number 11, which is reclock, and the pattern size, we'll make it half on all parts. Choose Enter, are you sure? Says complete. Now our tempo is still 120, but our measures are 2 measures. And listen to what happens. Plays twice as fast. Means you half-timed it. Let's undo. Are you sure? It goes back to the way it was before. Now we'll do double. Edit, reclock again, number 11. We'll change the pattern size to double. Press Enter. Are you sure? Press Enter again. Complete. Now, we're still at 120, but the measures are 8 measures. Watch what happens now. It plays in basically half time, or by doubling the pattern, puts it in half time. We'll go back and undo. Are you sure? Complete. It's back to the way we were before. That's the edit grid. With microscope editing, we can go in and modify on a per event basis. So let's say you played a bass line and one note was off. Rather than recording the whole thing over again, if you know what note that wrong note needs to be, you can go in and modify that one note. Or maybe one note was too loud, you can change the velocity of it. Maybe you held out one note too long, you can go and change the gate time of it. And I'll show you that right now. What we're going to do is we're going to go in and put in an orchestra hit at the beginning of this pattern on a different part. So the first thing we do is go to a different part, part number 4, move the level all the way up by using the part mixer. We'll go and choose the actual patch. So we'll go to the patch button, choose the category function to the right-hand side. So we'll go through the different categories. And I'll get all the way over to the orchestra hits. There we go. I'll choose number 7, which is orchestra hit number 1. Go back to pattern song. Here's our sound. Okay, now this isn't necessarily going to sound right with the pattern. It'll just be an obvious way that we can go in and see one note happening. Okay, so bear with me. So the first thing we're going to do is, to get into actual recording mode with microscope editing, you press record one time, then press it again. Now you are sitting in microscope edit mode. It shows you that there is no event on the screen, so it's time for us to put an event in. First thing we're going to do is insert an event, or a note. You go over to the right button on the left-hand side of the front panel, press the right button, it says Insert Event. Then it says Note underneath. If you rotate the value dial, you can choose Program Change or Control Change or Bend or Aftertouch, but we'll choose Note for now. Then you press Enter. It automatically put in a note. If you press Enter repeatedly, you can hear the actual note. Okay, well that's not the note we want, so on the left-hand side of the display it says C4, but what we'll do is we'll change that. So if you cursor over to the C4 and rotate the dial, and we'll go with that one. If you press Enter, it moves over to velocity, and we want to do it at full velocity. And then the gate time, you press Enter again, it goes to the gate time, and we'll choose, say, 48 for the gate time. And then press stop because you're done recording. Now, when I play it back, you hear the orchestra hit at the beginning. Try it again. Okay, so now we're going to move the event just on a per note basis. We press record 2 times on the same track, the same part, and you can see that there is a D3 at 127 velocity with a gate time of 48, and it shows you in the current display that it's at measure 1, beat 1 at tick 0. So what we want to do is put it on measure 1, beat 2 at tick 0. So it goes 1, 2, and then it'll happen. So what we're going to do is just move it. You're already on that particular event, so hold down Shift, then hold down Edit, hold down both of them together, and rotate the dial. The ticks will change, and you can go all the way up, and once you reach 95, the next tick is going to be measure 1, beat 2, 0. Let go of everything and press stop. Now you've moved it from the first beat to the second beat. Watch what happens. Happens at the second beat. Try it again. That's on the second section. So that's how you actually move an event, by holding down Shift, holding down Edit, and rotating the dial. The next thing we want to do is actually delete an event. So we'll go back and delete that exact event. Press record 2 times to enter microscope mode. It says that there's no event at 1, 1, 0, so we turn the value dial. It finds the very first event that it can find. There it is at 1, 2, 0. We want to delete it. Press Edit all by itself. It says delete event, are you sure? You press Enter, it's gone. Now you press stop again, start from the beginning, there's no more orchestra hit. Once again, to delete an event in microscope mode, press the record button 2 times to enter microscope mode, rotate the value dial to find the event you want to delete, press the edit button, the display will read delete event, are you sure? Press the enter button and then press stop to finish. Since the MC-505 contains the JV1080 synth engine, complete patch editing can be accomplished by using the third edit grid underneath the keypads. Now, although the real-time knobs and sliders can control and modify different patches, complete control over all parameters can be accomplished by using the third edit grid underneath the keypads. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and pick a patch and be in patch mode under display and modify using the actual edit grid underneath the keypads, okay? So first thing you want to do, in the display, press patch. We can play the sound. I'm going to category over through the different patch categories, just like we had pattern categories as well. We have patch categories. So we press the category button to the right. You have all basses, stack sounds, pad sounds, all strings, voice ooze, different effects, even into like all piano sounds, different organ sounds. Things like vibraphones and marimbas, the guitar sounds, the brass type sounds, other hit sounds, and then into some of the percussion sounds. So we'll go all the way back over to one of the voice sounds. It's called voice ooze. Actually, we'll move back to even further. How about some type of phasing vocal sound? And the reason I chose that one is because just like a JV-1080, you have 4 tones that create a patch. So you can have different elements of the sound. Like with a piano, you have the hammer hitting, and then you have the actual sustaining sound. And both of those tones together create the patch called piano. So what we're going to do is we'll choose this particular one because it has 2 different tones. And underneath the part mixer, you have the tone switch area and tone select area. And there are 4 tones that can be made up. This one happens to be using 2. I'll show you the 2 tones right now.
First, you need to press the Tone Select button, and then you can choose your tones.
Here's both of them together. If I turn off tone 2, there's 1 tone. Here is the other tone. But together, so you do have kind of a complex sound happening. So once we choose the sound we want, we're going to go in and actually change maybe like waveforms for it. So hold down Edit, and since you're in Display Patch area, then that means the 3rd edit grid becomes accessible. So what we want to do is the first button says Wave and Frequency Cross Modulation, so we'll press that one. And this will move us into the Wave section, which would allow us to choose different waveforms. So right now we're on tone switches, meaning that we have 2 of the 4 tones on. We'll press the Page to the Right button, and we can choose from the different wave selections. But right now, let's choose for only 1 of the tones. So we'll turn off one of the tones, we'll go to the Tone Select buttons, and actually press the first Tone Select button, meaning show me the waveform for the first tone only. Right now it's called Sub-Oscillator, and when I play it, you can hear it. If I rotate the value dial, we'll go through different waveforms. There's Distorted Synth, Distorted Square, MG Triangle, Jungle Bass. I'll rotate it back to like OB Saw, and on up into Slap Bass. And that's Power B Fast and Acoustic Piano. So I've chosen an acoustic piano sound on just this particular tone of this patch. So now I'll move over to Tone Select number 2, turn on Tone Select number 2. So now I have this complex sound, and this one is a formant type of waveform, and I'll rotate the dial and change that to something else. It's actually a waveform that says kick it. Now let's turn off the first tone. It's a kind of a synthesized kick it. And we'll turn the other tone back on with it. Now, we've got a couple different waveforms happening. Let's move on to some of the other things. We'll change the actual filter, kind of the cutoff and resonance thing we did with the real-time controls, but doing it from the edit grid as well. We'll go back and hold down Edit and go to number 4 because it says Filter underneath it. And we have the different types. We'll do this for the entire patch, so both tones. So you go to the Tone Select buttons, hold down Tone Select number 1, and while holding it down, press Tone Select number 2. Both will light up, one will blink, but it shows you that both have been selected. So now when I turn the dial, it'll affect both tones, not just one. So right now, we'll go with peaking, then we'll page over to the cutoff, and we'll page over a couple times to the resonance. So quite different from what we started with, but let's say we like that one. We've changed a few different things about it and we like it. We want to go on further. Let's go and add some LFO to it. So LFO is key number 9, hold down Edit and press number 9, and it shows you that we're using a triangle waveform. We'll page over. The rate is 45. We'll increase that to about 99. Page over again, and let's go to the actual depth. We'll move over to pitch depth. See how it adjusts the pitch as well. So we have some crazy sound happening now, and let's save it. Why not? Press the patch button again. It shows you that you have still the same name of the patch, but it shows a little asterisk in the upper right-hand corner next to the patch location, showing you that you have gone in and modified a current patch. If you want to save it, you have to make sure that that asterisk goes away, and that's what you do by saving it. So let's go and save this actual patch. We'll save it into either the user location or the card location, and I'll show you that right now. Press the right button. It will show you patch right at the very top of the display, and it'll show you the location on the right-hand side, and it says UA67. Now, if I want to put it on the card rather than in the user bank, I can simply go to the bank buttons, which is preset, user, and card, and press the card button. It'll say CA067, which meaning it's going on the card. So I'll put it actually back in the user bank. But remember what we did before. If we're going to save something, we may be writing over something that's already currently there. And yes, in the user bank, there are a bunch of patches already there. Some you may already like, some you may have already saved. So how did we go back and see what was in that location? We went to the undo redo button, we pressed it, and we can see, oh, well, it's the same exact patch.
Not only can you see what tone you're going to write over, but you can also hear it by playing the keypads.
So that's fine, I can save it there. So I'll press undo redo again to go back to the name. We can actually change the name by using the page buttons, and we'll call this one the same name, but I'll just change the first letter from a P to an S, and then press enter. It says, are you sure? Press enter again. Processing, keep power on. It says complete, and now you're done, and here's your new patch. There's a big difference between patch editing and rhythm set editing. If you're editing a patch, you affect the entire key range of notes. So if you have a bass guitar patch and you change the filter, all of the notes of that patch are going to be affected. But when you're dealing with a rhythm set, you have a different instrument on each individual key. So if you want to change the filter for just the snare drum, you have to be precise in saying just this particular key I want to change the filter on. And I'll show you how to do that right now. Press Part Select, then press Part R for rhythm, and you should have all of the rhythm sounds across the keyboard. The next thing you want to do is choose the actual sound you're going to want to play. So we're going to choose pad number 5, that's the clap sound. We'll go into the display area and press Patch, and it shows you that we're using the rhythm set TR909, which is P01. The next thing you want to do is hold down Edit and press number 16, which is Rhythm Tone. This is a very key thing to do because now it breaks it down on a per key basis. So right now we'll go in and press the key that we want to edit, which is number 5, and it shows that that's MIDI note number 51, and it is D#3, which is basically what we did push. We want to change the waveform of it, so we'll hold down Edit and go to number 1, which is Waveform. And then we'll page to the right one time, and it shows us on here that we've got the TR909 clap number 1 on D#3. That's what we're hearing. If you rotate the value dial, you can change it. And we'll choose one called down clap. So now we have a different sound there. Let's go and change something else about it. Let's say that we're trying to do a hip-hop song and we require a different pitch of that clap. So we can hold down Edit and go to where it says pitch, which is keypad number 2. It shows that our pitch is at 0 for the key D#3. And so now we rotate the value dial. And we'll choose -12. If we want to change anything else about it, maybe some of the filter, we can go to Edit, go find the filter, which is number 4, and we'll page over to Cutoff. We've made a huge mess of this clap sound, but that's what we wanted. So you can do this on each and every individual note, and then we can save it. And the way you save it, just like we did before, we went back to Patch, we went to Write, we're at user number 1, and do we want to write over something that was already there? Let's check. Press undo, it shows that something else was already there, so we'll rotate the dial and choose one that we can feel good about writing over the top of, and we'll choose, number 12. Press undo, redo again, press enter, it says are you sure? Press enter again. It says complete, and now you just got done changing a drum sound. The MC-505 has 6 mono or 3 stereo outputs. To send a patch out one of the outputs, use the following procedure. Press the part select button and then press the part number that you want. We'll choose number 2, which is a bass sound. Go into the display section and choose tempo mixer. And then in the part mixer section, press the function button on the left-hand side repeatedly until EFX/out is selected. On the screen, it'll say on the right-hand side, P2 equals dry, or EFX, or DIR1, or DIR2, showing you what output it's currently going to. If you would like to change that, use the following. Hold down Shift and move the part slider for that part. It will go from a D for dry to an E for EFX, meaning go out the mix outputs just like dry, but use the insert effect. Or, if you move it up a little higher, it says DIR1, which means go out direct 1. If you move it a little higher, it goes to DIR2, going out direct 2. Since it's just a bass sound, you may want to send it out just one side of the direct 2 or direct 1 or mix outputs. To do so, you need to pan the sound. Go into the part mixer again and press the function button again until you see pan is lit. And at that point, hard left or hard right will send it all the way out one side or all the way out the other.
When you're directing one patch out one output, if it's using multiple tones, make sure all the tones are panned dead center.
If you have reverb or chorus, or reverb or delay, or any of effects for that matter, on the sound, it'll always be in stereo. So if you want it to go out just one side, make sure there are no effects on it. So turn off all reverb, all chorus, all delay, any of the insert effects, and it'll go out that one side instead of both. Assigning multiple outputs to a rhythm set is a little different. I'll show you how to do that as well. Here's what we do. Go to Part Select, and then go to Part Select R for the rhythm set. Go to Tempo Mixer in the display area. Go to the Part Mixer again and choose the function button on the left-hand side. Press it repeatedly until you see EFX/out, just like before. When you go to move the actual slider by holding down the Shift button and moving the slider, you're going to get a different option this time. Hold down Shift, you can choose from Dry, EFX, Direct 1, Direct 2, and then at the very top you have RHY, means rhythm. So in the rhythm set, look at each individual instrument and go where they want to go. Now to tell them where they want to go, here's how you do it. In the display area, press the patch button again. Hold down the Edit button and press number 16 for rhythm tone. At that point, press the page right button 2 times and the screen reads Effects/out. It shows you the key on the lower left-hand corner and then the status on the right-hand corner. So then you can say, okay, well I want the clap sound, which is D-sharp 3, and then rotate the dial from dry to EFX to direct 1 or direct 2. Choose whichever one you want for there, press another key, rotate the dial again for that particular key. And then the machine will route it wherever you told it to go on a per instrument basis rather than the entire rhythm set going to one location.
Even if you're going to modify just an output of a patch or a rhythm set, you still need to save it by using the right procedure.
Pattern call allows you to retrieve your favorite patterns by pressing the keypads. Pattern call configurations can be saved as one of 30 pattern sets. Here's how you do it.
In the display section, you press the pattern set button to choose from the 30 different pattern sets. Now, I happen to have, for this demonstration, 2 custom pattern sets called Variety 1 and Variety 2. They're just ones I made up, but you can name yours whatever you like.
I'll push pattern call in the keyboard pad area on the lower left corner, and then by pressing keypad number 1, it calls up U103, which is Slow Jam 1, and here it is. Stop that, press number 2, it calls up U108, which is Slow Jam 2. All I did was press a different keypad, that's it. Now, by choosing a different pattern set, I go to Display, press Pattern Set, rotate the value dial and choose Variety 2, which is stored at User 02. Go back to Pattern Song, press the same key number 1 again, and it calls up Hip Hop Soul number 3, which is P180. And by pressing keypad number 2, it calls up P179, which happens to be Hip Hop Soul number 2. So if I want to assign a pattern that I like to one of these pattern sets, first I call up the pattern set that I want by pressing the pattern set button under display, go back to the pattern song button in display, call up the pattern that I want. So I'll choose cha-cha, which is P245, and I'd like to save that to key number 3. The way you assign it is hold down pattern call and press the key you would like to assign it to. It says complete, and now you're done. When I call up number 3, there's cha-cha for me. Just like a patch, when you've modified it, it puts the little asterisk next to the name. So if you press under display the pattern set button, variety 2 now has an asterisk U02, meaning you've modified it. So if you need to save it, here's how you do it. You press the right button, just like before. Make sure that the location is where you want to save it, which is U02. It's called variety 2, and you press enter. It says, are you sure? You press enter again. It's that simple. There's also RPS, or real-time phrase sequencing. It's perfect for basically any style of music. What it does is it lets you take a part of a pattern, like maybe the rhythm part or the bass part or something like that, and trigger it by pressing just one key. Kind of like a sampler would, except you're not triggering a sample, you're triggering a part of a pattern. And the way you go about doing it is very simple to do. You have 60 different RPS sets. You have 16 pads across the bottom, and so you have 16 different areas you can assign to these pads. And they can be from different patterns, different parts from different patterns. It's really easy to do. The first thing you want to do is go to the display section and press RPS set. Like I said, you have 60 to choose from here, and we'll choose like number U07, which is called the rave set. Go back to pattern song and turn on the RPS, which is in the bottom left-hand corner under keyboard pad. Now, by pressing one of the pads, there's the drum part from one pattern. Here's a drum part from another pattern. Here's the bass part from another pattern. And add some snare. They're all in the same tempo as well. So they're really easy to play. Now, if you're not the greatest player in the world, and maybe you're not going to hit it right on the mark, there is something called RPS Trigger Quantize, which is kind of nice as well. If you hold down Shift and then move over to Sequencer, which is number 11, and press the number 11 button, then use the page to the right button a couple times, you can see RPS Trigger Quantize. And you have a couple choices here. You have 16th notes, 8th notes, quarter notes, real, which is exactly when you play it, it starts playing, or measure, or MES for measure. What that means is, when you have it set to measure, when the next measure comes in, that's when your RPS is going to start to play. So you can play it a little before that measure starts. It won't play until the next measure comes in. So you're guaranteed to be right on the money every time you use an RPS set. I'll set mine to 16th notes, so I can play and be right before the next 16th note, it'll pick it up and start playing it. Okay, so we'll exit out of there by pressing exit, and so now I can play. Now if I choose a pattern that has maybe a drum sound in it, let's play this one. Its tempo is 132. That means everything in the RPS is going to be at 132 as well. It's playing right along with the pattern that I have playing. There's also a hold button. To assign a part of a pattern to an RPS key, use the following procedure. Find the pattern that you would like to grab the part from. Mute everything else out except for that particular part. So I'll mute everything else except part number 2 because I'm going to take the bass of this particular pattern. Hold down the RPS key and press the key you would like to assign it to. There's one there. I'll also take a synth sound or a synth part from this same pattern. So mute out the bass, unmute the synth, hold down RPS, and assign it to key number 4. Then I'll go to a different pattern and grab just the drums from there. So rotate the data dial to the left, mute out everything except the drums, hold down RPS and assign it to key number 5. Now, everything is in there. I'll play them back for you. Here was the drums I got back. Here's the bass. And here's the synth part. So now you can play them together. Now, you have to save it, right? Because you have made a modification to an RPS set. So you go back to the display area, press RPS set. You'll see that there is an asterisk next to U07. Maybe we'd like to save it to U01. So you press the right button, just like before. Rotate the dial until it says U01. You can change the name if you want by pressing the page buttons. When you're done, press enter. It says, "Are you sure?" Press enter again. Processing, keep power on. Then it'll say complete, and now you're done. Go back to pattern song. The mute control track will allow you to automate mutes and change tempo on a per pattern basis. So if you have a pattern, you can speed it up or slow it down while the pattern's playing just by putting in tempo changes. Okay? Here's how you do it. Let's say we chose a pattern, and I know you're probably sick and tired of this pattern, but you know, this is just what we've been creating. So we'll enter microscope mode, just like we did before, by pressing record twice. So 1, then 2. Then go over to the mute control track button, which is just to the left of the R button, and press it 1 time. It'll probably say no event because you don't have any type of event on that track already. Just like in microscope editing before, if we want to insert an event, we press the right button. And it says insert event, and it lets you choose what type of event you want. We'll move the value dial until it says tempo. Now, right now, it's going to be at measure 1, beat 1, clock tick 0. So that's fine, we'll do that. We'll press enter. It'll say the tempo changed, and it says the value. Right now it's at 120. We want to make it go up a little higher than that. So we'll hold down Shift, turn the knob, and we'll change it to, let's go to 135, and then press enter, and then press stop. So now we have a tempo change. It's right at the beginning though. We need to go back and move it a little bit later because we want it to start off at 120 and then about halfway through speed up to 135. Here's how we do it. You go back into microscope editing mode by pressing record twice. 1, 2. Go over to the mute control track again, press it. You'll see the tempo change on the screen, and we need to move it. So just like we did before, hold down Shift, then hold down Edit, so you're holding both down at the same time. Rotate the value dial, and that will switch it to a different location. So let's put it all the way up at 1, 3, 11. Let go, press stop. So now when we play the song, it starts off at 120. And it immediately went to 135. Try it again. We'll go back and choose the same thing again. Goes back at 120, and you can even watch the screen. Goes right up to 135. When it curls back around, it'll stay at 135. If you wanted it to go back down to 120, you would have to put in another tempo change at the very beginning so it would go back down to 120. Putting it in exactly the same way though. One other thing you can do with the mute control track is automate mutes. So let's say in the middle of our pattern we'd like the bass just to be muted for a little bit. Here's how we're going to go about doing that. The bass is on part number 2, and that's okay, we can keep part number 2, but we're going to do this on the mute control track. Go back into microscope editing. We'll press record twice. We'll go back over to the mute control track and press it. We'll insert a new event. We'll press right, and instead of a tempo, we want it to say mute. Then press enter. Now it's going to say mute and the part that we're going to mute. And right now it says R, but we're going to change that because I want it to say P2 for the track that the bass is on. And then it says value equals off. That means that when it's set to off, it's muted. And when it's set to on, then it's back on and playing. So we want an off for right now, but we need to move it. So we'll hold down Shift, hold down Edit, rotate the dial, and we'll put this at measure number 2. I'll turn it a little bit faster. Measure number 2, right at beat number 2. And then press stop. And now, when we press play, the bass is gone. When it comes back around, it's still gone. It never got a turn back on or an unmute event. So we need to go put that one in there as well. Let's go to a little bit further in the song, or in the pattern, and I'll put in an unmute event. So we'll go to record 2 times again, back to mute control, and we'll even turn the dial and move to the first event. We can see a tempo change at 1-3-11. We can turn it again, and at 2-2-0 we have a mute. So let's make another one by pressing right. The insert event is mute, press enter. We'll change the part again so it says P2, and this time we'll page over and change the off to on. Now we need to move it down a little further in the pattern itself so it comes back on. So hold down Shift, hold down Edit as well, rotate the dial, and we'll go to measure number 3, and about the third beat of measure number 3. There we go. Press stop. Now, when we play this, you should hear the bass for a little bit, then it'll cut out, and then the bass will come back in, and then it'll loop back around again. Bass is out right now because it's still muted. There comes the bass again. It's playing, it'll cut out. Now it'll come back in and loop around again. Just like that. Okay, let's say you've created a bunch of patterns and now you want to link them together to make a song. It's real easy to do, and I'll show you how to do that. Go underneath the D-Beam controller and press the mode button 1 time until you're in the song mode, and you'll know that because it'll say song after one of the titles. We have to call up the actual patterns that we want within the song, and here's how you do it. You go into record by pressing the record button, and then call up the pattern that you want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the page button to the right for the different categories, and I'm going to go over to Hip Hop East, which is P133. To enter that in to step number 1, press enter. The current display changes to 2, so now it's waiting for the second pattern. And I'll change the dial real quick and choose Hip Hop East number 2 and press enter again. Then I'll just choose the same one again and press enter again. Now at step number 4, I'm going to go to Hip Hop East number 3 and press enter. So now I've put in a few different patterns. You know, in one location it was the same pattern 2 times in a row, and then we'll go through and see how it plays. Just press stop and then press play. There's the first pattern. Here comes the second pattern. Here comes the third pattern, which happens to be the same thing. Here comes the fourth pattern. Very easy to do. Now, you do have an asterisk to the right-hand side of the location of this particular song. So that means, you know, just like before, you've done something to it, you need to save it. So just like saving before, you press the right button, choose the location with the value dial, press enter a couple times, and you're on your way. Now, there is a little tip I do want to give you. If you want to choose one pattern that has a bunch of different parts in it, and then put it in over and over again into your song, you can also go through and determine the mute settings on each level or at each step of that song. And I'll show you how to do that as well. We're back in the same song. We'll go to record, just like before. We'll choose a different pattern that we have. I'll go to Psytrance number 2. And the way the mute is set up right now, everything is on except for 4, 5, and 7. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, well that's fine for the first one, press enter. So I'm going to use the same exact pattern, but this time I'm going to mute everything except just R and 2, and then press enter. And then after that, the next step, I'm going to mute out the drums. So I have just number 2 playing, press enter. Then I'll go back and I'll turn off number 2 and put on just 4, 5, 6, and 7, and press enter. And then the last one, I'll go back and I'll turn everything on except for 5 and 7, and press enter. Then press stop. Now when you go back to play the song, you can look at the mute settings and watch how they will stay with what you told it to do at that particular step in the song. So here we go. 4, 5, and 7 are muted. Switch again. Now just R and 2 are playing. Everything else is muted. Next thing, just number 2 is playing because I muted the drums. Bring it all back in. 4, 5, 6, and 7 are playing. Everything else went out. And now, 5 and 7 will be muted. Everything else is playing. The Smart Media 4 card allows you to have 512 extra patches, 20 more rhythm sets, 200 more user patterns, and adds 480,000 notes to the sequencer. All that on a card about the size of a silver dollar. There are 4 different utility procedures you can go through with a Smart Media card. We'll pop that into the machine. Hold down Shift and press the number 15 keypad, which is Card. You have Format, User Backup, Backup Load, and Backup Delete. Formatting is pretty obvious. You need to format the card so the machine can recognize that card so it can save the information to the card. And all you do is when you go over to Format, you press Enter twice and you're on your way. If you page to the right, you have User Backup, meaning take everything that is in my user setup, my user patterns, my user rhythm sets, and my user patches, and put them as a backup on the card. And you do that by pressing Enter twice as well. Paging to the right again, Backup Load. Once you have backed something up to the card, you want to load it back into the machine. Choose Backup Load, press Enter twice, you're on your way. The last one is Backup Delete. I want to delete the backup that's currently on the card. Same thing, press Enter twice, you're done. You may want to use your 505 with the rest of your MIDI studio. Now whether it's a master controlling other devices or a slave being controlled like maybe by a keyboard or a sequencer, the 505 can easily adapt. Now let's say you prefer playing from a MIDI keyboard, like say you have an XP60 or an 80 or a PC200 Mark II. It can easily just play the sounds of the MC-505. You connect the MIDI out cord from the keyboard to the MIDI in on the MC-505. Then, depending on what MIDI channel you're transmitting on, that's what part is going to play. The way the MIDI channels line up on the 505 is this. The R part, or the rhythm part, is on MIDI channel 10. 1 is on 1, 2 is on 2, 3 is on 3, and so on. But you can change that using the remote keyboard in. So if you hold down Shift and press number 12, the first thing says Remote Keyboard. Turn that on and press Exit. It says Processing, Keep Power On. Now, it doesn't matter what MIDI channel you're transmitting on from your keyboard. It just matters what part you select. So like right now, this is transmitting on 1, but I have R pushed. And I'm playing all the drum sounds. When I go to number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, you can also use your MC-505 to trigger external MIDI devices as well. We have an SP-808 sampler over here, and it's set to receive on MIDI channel number 1. We've connected the MIDI out from the 505 to the MIDI in of the 808, and we've gone over and pressed part select and then gone to part number 1. Since that's on MIDI channel 1, we want to transmit on MIDI channel 1 from the 505. By holding down Shift and pressing number 12 for MIDI, and then paging over to MIDI Local TX, you can choose from 3 different things. You have a B for both, an I for internal, and an E for external. What this means is your keys now are going to play an internal sound, an external sound, meaning the sampler, or both. So in this situation, we want just an external sound, so you would choose E for external. Then press Exit, Processing. Once it's done, then you can play the keys on the front panel of the 505 and trigger the samples over here. So let's say we've got to number 6. Happens to be a beat loop. And what I want to do is I want it to play, it happens to be the same BPM as well. I have a pattern that's 130, and the sample is 130. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into microscope mode and create an event, or a note, just like we did before, to trigger that sample. Go into Microscope Editing, press record twice, just like we did before. Make sure you're on part number 1, because that's where we're going to put it. And to insert an event, we're going to do just like we did in Microscope Editing. You press the right button. It says Insert Event, Note. We say, yeah, that's what we want. Press Enter. It says C4, but this particular pad triggers on E3, so we'll rotate the dial until we're at E3 with a velocity of 127, so we'll just go full velocity. And then there's the gate time. Now, when you're doing beat loops, this one happens to be a one measure sample. So what we want to do is have it play one measure, then have it repeat itself again, and have it repeat itself again, and so on. So the way the pulse per quarter note works inside the MC-505, this has 96 pulses per quarter note. You know how you have the beats 1, 2, 3, and 4, but you also have the 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a. Those are the pulses per quarter note, or the individual areas that you can break down in between the regular quarter notes of a measure. This has 96, so if you do that times 4, it's going to be 384 for one whole measure. What we want to have happen is start playing at the beginning and then play all the way until one tick before it needs to start at the next measure. So that means 384 is one whole measure, so we want it to go 383. So I'll change the gate time to 383. .383, here we go, right there. And then press stop. The next thing we want to do is change the sequence out parameter, because we only want track number 1 to play an external device rather than an internal device, or just both. So what we'll do is hold down Shift and press pad number 8 for sequence out. It'll show you what each one of the different tracks are playing, whether it's both internal or external. So we have part number 1, and we want that to be external, and then press exit. So now it should play just one measure, and then the other measures would be blank, at least for the sample. It plays for 1, and then it stops playing. So rather than inserting 4 different events, why don't we just take the first one and copy it 3 times? So let's do that by holding down Edit and pressing number 1 for copy, making sure only number 1 has been selected, and we want from measure 1 for only one measure. Page over, that's fine. Page over again. Destination is the temp pattern, that's fine. Page over again, the destination measure. We want to take measure 1, copy it for one measure, and start it at measure 2. So we'll change that to measure 2. Cursor over again, status will be all, that's fine. Page over again, mode replace or mix. We can do replace, there was nothing on measure 2 anyways on this track. And then how many times? We want it to do 3 times. So then we've taken one measure, copied it to 2, and repeated it 2 more times after that. So that's a total of 3 times. Page over again, are you sure? Enter for complete, and now it should play all the way through. Loop around, and there you go. You've synced an external sample with the actual pattern. So now I've got a pattern on my MC-505. I also have a sequence inside my software sequencer, and I'm going to make the sequencer start and stop the MC-505. First thing I need to do is hold down Shift, go over to pad number 11, which is sequencer, change the sync mode to slave, then press exit, and that'll be processing. Bring out my keyboard over here. Once that gets ready, by the way, the pattern was at 123 BPM. The sequencer is at 130 BPM, so this will be a little faster than the normal pattern was. So when I press play on the sequencer, press stop, rewind it, press it again, it starts right at the beginning. It can continue, or go back to the top of the song. All you have to make sure is that your software sequencer is transmitting start and stop and continue messages. Now that we've synced the clock of the 505 to our external sequencer, I'd like to actually record a pattern from the 505 into the sequencer for, future modifications. So what we've done is I've already gone through and taken the drums and the bass and recorded them in there. But now it's time to do the third part. First thing I need to do is unmute the third part. I only want one part to be recorded into this track. So that's what I did, unmute the third part. The first thing I'm going to do is select the proper channel. So that's MIDI channel 3. Then I'm going to choose the proper port. And now I'll even go over and choose the bank and the patch from the computer. The bank is preset B. The patch is DOC stack. And there we go. Okay, now I'm going to mute the other two tracks and select the track I want to record on. And here we go. Unmute those two tracks and play the whole thing back. We've covered a lot of ground, so now I'm going to give you a couple little cool tips to make your life easier and save you in the long run. Let's say you're doing techno music and they really have quite a rapid hi-hat thing going on, and maybe you just can't play it. Let's use the arpeggiator on the hi-hat part to actually play the hi-hat for us. Check it out. Here's what I have. Here's my hi-hat sound. If I turn the arpeggiator on, and it happens to be on sequence B, when I hold them down, pretty cool, huh? So let's go ahead and record that. Turn off the arpeggiator and play it back. Instant techno hi-hats. Cool tip number 2 is, let's make our drums go in reverse by using the D beam. Check this out. Here's my pattern. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my hand over the D beam, first set the D beam to key shift -S for selected part. Make sure your selected part is R for rhythm. Then go in and watch what happens. I'll do it by itself. Now when I play everything, only the drums will go in reverse. Cool tip number 3, mute swapping. I've got a pattern here that has parts 1, 3, and 4 muted and parts R, 2, and 5 playing. By holding down part mute and pressing part select repeatedly, it will swap the mute settings. Check it out. R, 2, and 5 are playing. Hold down part mute, press part select, and switch. And go back. Great for putting a song together. Cool tip number 4. If you don't have a smart media card, you can still back up and retrieve all of your user patterns and patches to an external sequencer using the bulk dump feature. It's real easy to do. Take a MIDI chord from MIDI out, go to MIDI in on your sequencer. Hold down Shift, press the dump button, which is number 16. Page over 2 times to all, so it says bulk, all, send. Put your sequencer into record mode, have it recording, and press enter. All of the information will get dumped out of the MIDI port into your sequencer. You can save it away on disk. When you want to play it back, all you have to do is connect the MIDI out from the sequencer to the MIDI in, hold down Shift, press the number 16 button again, and page all the way over to where it says bulk receive waiting. And then press play on the sequencer with that file in it, and it'll play right back in, go into the temporary buffer area, and then you can turn around and save all of the patches and the actual pattern to a user location. As you can see, the MC-505 is a very powerful piece of equipment. We hope that we've given you enough additional information so you can get the most out of your Groovebox. I'm Tony McGuire. and enjoy yourself.